Hello, and welcome to another episode of Recovery Matters. I'm your host, Orlando Andrews, and this is the place where we talk about different aspects of recovery, from mental health issues, behavioral health issues, and substance use disorder. And we are actually here today, like on the show, talking about, I like to bring different types of people on, and sometimes it's resources. A lot of times right now we're talking about different recovery stories because I'm really fascinated by how people navigate recovery. And so today you're going to meet Rich Johnston. He is a person in long-term recovery. He's also someone who helps other people out and actually introduces them into recovery as well. I tend to know a lot of people like that. So welcome, Rich. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, man.
So what we're going to talk about, I'm kind of fascinated. Let's begin with kind of some of your, well, first of all, what is your sobriety date?
October the 20th of 2016.
Okay. And so that's 6 years now, or are we going almost 6 years?
Almost.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to count the chicken before it hatches.
You're on your way.
On my way.
To 6 years. And so was that a one and done type thing, or was it a while to get there?
No, it was definitely a road.
Okay.
I went to my first inpatient treatment in 2012.
Okay. How old were you then?
21, 22, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Out in California.
So let's talk about what is your childhood like? Kind of seeing, were there signs that there was an issue? Was the environment that you grew up in something that might have added to some of the issues that was going on with you in recovery?
I don't know. I guess it's still like kind of a mystery to be unlocked.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely had a childhood that facilitated unhealthy and untrue belief systems about myself and the world around me.
Okay. In which way? And what do you mean by that?
So my father was absent since day one.
Okay.
Mom basically taught me from a young age that the rules don't apply to us.
Okay.
That whenever there was, some kind of rule that was found to be inconvenient, that it was, that we were part of some extenuating circumstance that made the whatever rule not applicable.
Okay.
That was how I received.
And so give me an example of like how you thought the rules didn't apply to you, or your mother might have kind of put that into your head.
I have vague childhood memories of like jumping the line at the grocery store, and then there like somebody saying something, and then like my mother rebuttaling that we have something very important to get to after this, and
Okay.
sorry, but we have to cut this line, and it's innocuous enough on the surface,
Right.
but kind of little things like that over and over and over again.
So instead of her saying, hey, you should let these people go first and get in, she's like protecting you, saying, because she wanted to skip the line as well.
Instead of just waiting in the line. It's a line.
You're right. Okay, so like little things like that. So you said your father was absent. Did you feel that as you were growing up, or was that something that you didn't think about till you got older?
I didn't understand it. When I was 3, my mom remarried to my stepdad, who, that's who I called dad. Mm-hmm. And I had this other guy who was in prison by that time, and he would call on the phone sometimes. And, I was 4 or 5 years old, he would call on the phone, and that was Daddy Richard.
Okay.
His name's Richard, too.
Uh-huh. So your dad's name's Richard, and then your
I'm a
stepdad.
junior.
Okay.
I'm a junior. Yeah, my stepdad's name was Mike.
Okay.
But Daddy Richard was my dad, and then Dad was my stepdad.
Okay.
So I didn't think of, I never, as a little kid, I never stopped to think, who is the person who, inoculated my mother with me? Mm-hmm. It was I don't know if that's the right way to say it.
That's like inoculate. Okay. New word for impregnate.
That's what I was looking for.
But so, it wasn't necessarily, he was there, you knew he was in prison at the time.
And he was some guy, he was personable and nice, and we got along, but I just never stopped to consider it, He was like some guy who was part of my family. I don't know.
So there wasn't this broken heart, oh my God, I don't have a father, or my father's in prison, or nothing that was conscious that was actually creating that. You had enough support in your space with your mother and whoever she might have been with, your stepfather.
Yeah.
Was there any addiction in the household at the time?
Yeah, most of it was unbeknownst to me until a few years later.
Mm-hmm.
my stepdad was, turns out he used crack cocaine and, weed and drank a lot and, kind of whatever. But we were all like pretty sequestered from that, until, I remember being, I don't know how old, but at some point, like I would find like a corncob pipe and be like, hey, what's up with this?
Right.
And my mother, like in that time, got involved in like this sect of Christianity, and I don't know what it's called. It's like this very like, kind of into like this purity culture.
Okay.
She was part of this Way Down workshop thing that has got like a, turned out to be a cult, turned out to have a special on HBO.
Okay. What was it? Do you know the name of the special on HBO by chance?
Oh man, no.
Hey, there's a special on HBO, everybody, about some church cult.
It's in Brentwood. It's in Brentwood, Tennessee.
Okay.
That's like
I
where
don't know.
it's
I don't
based.
really know what it is. I'm not really sure, so I'll have to go look for it though, and I will. So, but she was in this cult.
Yeah, it
Okay.
like intertwined like weight loss with Jesus.
Okay. 'Cause Jesus wants everybody to be skinny.
I mean, it was, I can't remember, there's like a name for this like sect of Christianity. It's like this Pentecostal, like, whatever it was, like it definitely manifested itself in ways that I experienced as unhealthy.
Okay.
And my mother particularly. But yeah, that of like, if you were overweight, it's because you were praying, you were eating instead of praying. And like that was the
Okay.
logic.
Okay.
And that, yeah, they ended up like, they told some parents to like beat their kid with a glue stick and lock them in a like a chest, and they did it, and the kid died, and that, the lady died in a helicopter crash. This is the pastor, like leader of the cult, died in a helicopter crash on Percy Priest Lake.
I know none of this.
Dude,
So we have to go and actually find whatever you're talking about because it's fascinating.
Yeah, they're still there.
But
It's in
how
Brentwood, sorry.
old were you when this was happening, when your mom was like part of this cult? Like, what was going on?
Man, I was like 9 or 10 by this point, and like I wasn't experiencing it as a cult. It was like just this program that was at this church that we went to, and my mom was really in a church. Stepdad would never come. Dad's in jail. But mom would bring me and my sister to church every Sunday religiously.
Okay.
Literally. And so bad. And she and she would bring us over and over on Sundays, and it was a lot of like speaking in tongues and like heavily into like this prophecy, like end of days stuff.
Okay.
I spent the year 2000, like when that whole thing clicked over and we had Y2K. My mother was like a big believer in like this Y2K thing, and I spent it in the church with like an entire congregation erupting into tongues as the clock struck midnight, sure that the world was going to end.
It's okay. Y2K, I mean, I thought that was a stretch. I always thought that was a stretch. Like, I thought that was invented like at the last minute to freak people out. Like, I was all about the Mayan calendar, 2012. I kind of knew the world was going to end in 2012.
That one was way better.
Yeah.
But that
was a real prophecy,
Orlando, I was 9 years old, okay? And they explained this to me, and I said, wait, that just means all the clocks are going to be wrong.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that the planes are going to crash. Nobody's going to know what time it is, but geez.
Right. So now, working in that space, did that give you like issues with Christianity? Did that give you issues with like higher power? Did you think about it at all at that time? Were you saved in the church? Did you get baptized?
Yeah, I think I was baptized as a baby, but it didn't give me any issues at the time because I was, I was young and I had like my couple friends in the neighborhood, and like we never talked about going to church, but like I was a child and like this was presented to me as absolute truth, by my mother, and mother is the word for God on the lips of all children.
Right. For a while, anyway.
Yeah.
Until puberty. Mom is evil. So
no, I never, like, it didn't seem like a problem. I remember being a little afraid of it. The pastor was loud and he would like run through the pews and stuff, and it was big and loud and kind of scary, but also kind of cool. As a little boy, like, okay, I like big, loud,
right,
yelling and stuff. It's great.
It's like the energy.
Yeah, it's good energy, and that, dude, if anything, to this day, that's what I take is like, like the performance of it all is spectacular.
Okay, and so when was the first time that you actually found yourself using anything to kind of escape your life?
I started a little later in life. I was 17 or so. I was 16 or so and drank and smoked a little bit of weed, but that wasn't...
Okay, why do you consider that to be later? Like 16 or 17 as opposed to like 12 or 13?
Yeah, because that's what, I don't know, I feel like that's more common.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know, maybe no, I'm like, but it's okay. Like it's
like Casey started at like 9.
Casey being your wife,
Kind
right?
of like live-in baby mama.
Yeah, the baby mama,
who I'm in a committed
the
relationship
common law
with.
thingy.
Yes.
So she started when she was.
She said she was like 9 or something, so I hear that and I'm like, and she like rags on me all the time, you know, like.
Yours is late compared to 9 years old.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I would say that, you know, I don't think 17 to me is kind of early, you know, teenagers. But nowadays, I don't know if you see Euphoria. Are you watching that show at all?
No, but Casey did, so I've seen pieces of it.
Yeah, it shows you that it's much earlier now, that the common age is a lot more like what you're thinking it is, and that 17 nowadays would be way late. So like, but in my old generation, in the days like 17, that's kind of like when it would start
And maybe
a little
that's
bit.
influenced it too, like seeing like the, you know, like census at like adolescent treatments is just
That's true.
ballooned up, and maybe that's like kind of influenced my zeitgeist or something.
So 17, and what did you do around that time?
Man, you know, I started sleeping with my teacher in high school.
Okay, and how old was your teacher?
30.
30? And
Yeah,
you were...
I started sleeping with her when I was like 16 or 17.
Okay.
Or something like that, and it was totally weird. She was married and had kids, and like you know, like me being 16 years old, like here's this lady, you know, like an attractive older lady and an authority figure, and she was like wanting to have sex with me, and I know that like she is she's married and she has kids, and like there's something inside that's like, dude, this is wrong. Don't do this. But I'm 16. I'm a guy. Like,
right. So would you look at that now as like child abuse, or no, it's fine because you were, you know, I think the age of consent for men is 16, right? Is
Yeah,
that
something
kind of
like that.
somewhere in the head of people?
yeah, no, it's definitely child abuse. Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, that's,
Right.
you know, the law be damned. I mean, that's, you're sleeping with a 16-year-old.
Exactly.
You know, so that legally, I don't know.
Someone
you know,
that's
I'm
supposed to
not
be
a
under
lawyer.
your care, that you're supposed to be taking care of, that you're supposed to be, you know,
it
making
was
like a role
gross.
model for it. But like, so was it your first person that you've ever slept with?
Lost
so
my
like,
virginity.
Lost your virginity to a high school teacher. Okay. And how long did that go on?
Dude, like a year or two,
Okay.
like a while.
Until you graduated, or even after graduation?
I think until I graduated. I
Okay.
think that it was right around then that it kind of stopped.
Are,
But
you,
that's
are you in touch with this person anymore? Do you have any idea where she is? Like,
no idea.
Okay.
No idea. Haven't even heard anything about her in 10 years or more.
Interesting. Do you want to give us her name?
Yeah,
Or you guys can hunt her down.
Yeah, there's some department out there that's
Bring her
supposed to
to
be handling
justice.
this. Can you guys please?
I was like, so I mean, anyway, it's more
Yeah.
common than you would think. Actually, I have quite a few stories of people who have had inappropriate. I was one also who have had inappropriate relations with a high school person when I was 16, 15, 16, 17. So it's more common than you think. I don't know. I wouldn't say that it was very long. It might have been about 2 years, but I look at it now as being inappropriate, like totally inappropriate. At the time, I thought it was kind of cool or interesting, and I even thought it was my fault, like I had instigated it or I had done something. But in reality, it comes down to, you know, this person is an authority figure, they're an adult, and they should know better.
Yep. And that's all skewed by like all the high fives from the bros.
Exactly. Everybody thinks it's cool, you know. In my situation, I don't think it would have. Yeah, it wasn't something that I could talk about at all. So
Yeah. And you know, for some people it might be cool, and that's, you know, whatever, great, but like it's not.
Did you see that show, A Teacher? By chance? Okay, that just came out. It was on Hulu. It was kind of the concept.
Really?
And like how, in theory, the idea, because you've like skewed the concept of like being an adult, or actually the things that you're supposed to experience as a child, and you've experienced them a little early, and kind of like, so you're not going through the same socialization that the other kids are going to, like their high school sweethearts and crushes, and, you know, college with the fraternity. And so you've already had this experience that's a little different from what everybody else is going through. And so what ends up happening in this particular space is that they're unable to cope with life correctly, and they tend to really be affected by this in a way that has skewed their perception of how they're developing as a adult. I don't know if that happened to you at all. Like you were fine after the 2 years.
No, it was a major factor. It was, you know, that's when I started using drugs, and I didn't think twice about it at the time. But
Did she introduce you to drugs, or you
No,
started
she was
using
mad that I
them?
was doing drugs.
Okay.
You know, it was like this weird, like maternal, nurturing, like don't do drugs kind of thing.
Okay.
It was such a creepy relationship, dude. Like
And so,
looking
what
back
kind
on
of
it,
drugs were you doing at the time?
I was like over the counter, like sleep aids and cough medicines.
Okay.
And that's because I was having a hard time sleeping. So through the course of being in a relationship with her, I was totally isolated from like any of my friends my own age. I was like going to school and messing around with her and coming home, and you know, my mom had been divorced and in relationships, so I was living in like a half-finished basement with like blankets as my walls in East Baltimore.
Okay.
And I just had like, you know, a mattress on the floor and like these blankets for my walls, and I would just like get off of school and go down there and eat sleep medicine and coughing pills because I was having a hard time sleeping. So my mom got me some, you know, like over-the-counter sleep aids and was like, "Here, I got you this
Okay.
to help you sleep." And I like, you know, naturally it being like 2008, I like plugged it in on the internet, and it was like, "Hey, take a whole bunch of these and you'll feel great." I was like, "Okay, internet,
Okay.
I'll do that."
And so, when did it actually escalate into something more than that?
I guess it's hard to say. You know, it kind of like crept around me like a vine or something. I guess I knew I was in trouble. It wasn't until years later I knew I was in trouble. You know, the thing had broken off with my teacher, and I got like a real girlfriend who was my age, and she broke up with me. So this was like 2010, 2011.
And how old were you then?
20, 21.
Okay. Did you go to college?
Man, I was parallel enrolled for a semester, and then I wanted to apply to go to college because I thought that would be a wise decision. And nobody had the money to pay for it, but like I know about this thing called like FAFSA. Or am I saying that right?
I think so.
It was something,
But I know what you're talking about.
it was something like they would,
Yeah,
you know, they would pay
the
for your
student
school.
aid, yeah.
And they needed my mom's social security. No, they needed at least one of my parents' social security number. And it was, you know, it had to be my mom. And she was like, "No, I'm not giving it to you." Yeah, she was like, I don't know what this is. It's, you know, probably a scam, and you need to be focusing on working anyway. And
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So I was like, you know, well,
So your mom wasn't necessarily supportive of you going to college, or?
my mom was all about the job, man. That was like her thing, like get like a good government job with benefits and, you know, work hard for 30 years and scrape by. And
And she didn't believe you needed college for that necessarily?
I guess not.
Okay.
I never really asked her, but her actions.
Did she
kinda
go to
say-
college?
No, she went to like a tech school or, you know, like a vocation school or something.
Okay. And so, what were the drugs that you started on, or how did that, like when it started to escalate, what was it that you were kind of like experimenting with, or where did you find yourself?
Started smoking weed, got busted smoking weed, and got put on a like marijuana diversion program where they would like, you know, like sit us down in like a IOP setting and make us watch Reefer Madness over and over again.
Reefer Madness?
Remember Reefer Madness?
I do not.
Serious?
I do not
You never saw
know.
Reefer Madness?
Mm-mm,
Oh,
no.
it's like this propaganda from the 40s, you know, saying like, you know, just tying like the use of marijuana in with like really racist ideas.
Okay.
And
I've never seen that, no.
you've got to, it's a classic piece. You've got to watch Reefer Madness. Basically,
Okay.
like, you know, it says everyone who isn't white is bad, and you know, don't smoke weed.
Okay.
And if you smoke weed, I'm not even going to repeat it. So like,
I was like, I have never heard of this before, ever. So I'll have to go out and actually check out Reefer Madness. So,
definitely check out Reefer Madness. It's a classic.
so you started with marijuana and got into a diversion program. So,
Couldn't smoke weed anymore.
okay.
Started smoking spice all the time, and that became habitual.
Okay.
Like crazy habitual. Most people don't know. Like, I mean, it is. You know, it's just super
Isn't that the
habit
one that
forming.
makes you go crazy?
Some
like
people.
psychotic? Like, is that, you know, it's
I've seen it happen.
not like a K2 type thing, like a little different?
It was it was K2 spice,
Okay,
kind of like
okay.
all in the same family,
Yeah.
and like varying like potencies.
But
and
you didn't have to deal with that. That wasn't anything crazy?
there was something wrong with me
Okay.
for a few years. There was something wrong with me, you know. It was it's hard to describe. It's fuzzy. I was just messed up on drugs all the time, you know, some like weird gas station drug.
Right.
You know, it was just so.
So I
and
think that's what people don't realize is like all of these, you know, circa 2000s, you know, they started getting these like
2010-ish.
things where you can get, you know, over the counter like K2, spice, and they don't realize that they're just as bad. I forgot what's the Delta 8 now is one
they
of
have
them
a
that's
thing.
out right now that people are going kind of psychotic over. Someone called about recently, but there's all these drugs out there that aren't really classified as drugs, but they're just as you actually have hallucinations. You know, you have schizophrenic episodes. You know, there's a lot of stuff that people don't realize, and insurances won't cover them. That's the other thing. It's like since they're not classified as illegal or a drug, that they're, you know, people are just out there using and getting away with it, but it's really messing with their mental health. So you're saying you weren't okay?
No, I was
time,
far
right?
from okay, bro.
Right.
I was bad. You know, I was like, me and my cousin had like moved into a basement together, and that we were just like stealing the wires from the power lines. Like I was
Okay.
working a job and I was stealing the wires from the power lines to go to scrap metal yards
Okay.
to get spice, and like that was my life. Hanging out in this basement we were renting, smoking spice, and stealing the power lines
Okay.
in East Baltimore.
Okay. So, and how long did that last?
You call it like 2 years, and that's what landed me in that first inpatient
Okay.
treatment.
And so when you went inpatient, you were working. Did you have insurance? Were you? Or
Yeah.
did you? Okay, so you had insurance through your job.
Well, I'd followed Miles' advice and gotten a job with Baltimore County Public Schools.
Okay.
And I was working with special needs kids on
Okay.
school buses. Yeah, and I had like a Blue Cross policy or something that covered
Okay, so you were able to get into like a decent
Michael's house.
in Michael's house. Yay, we like Michael's house. So very good.
Yeah, all right.
That was not an endorsement. So the idea
You
is,
literally looked at it and said,
I
"We
know.
like
we
Michael's
do
house."
like Michael's house, but I'm not trying to endorse like a program. So, you know, don't get me wrong. I just like there's some programs out there that have really good reputations, and Michael's house is one of them.
Yeah.
So, how did it work for you? How was it?
Dude, I was not having it. I was like, I went because I was working for Baltimore County Public Schools, and summer had come up, and you know, working in the summertime, couldn't pay my rent for my basement or my my car insurance, just whatever. You know, I was just kind of out of rope. So I called Mom. I was like, Mom, I got a drug problem. You know, please, can I go? I want to go to rehab really bad, but I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. Knowing in my manipulative mind that Mom's house had just burnt down and she got like a fat check from the insurance company and had all this money, and she's like, oh, baby, I'll pay all your bills if you just go to treatment. And it was a scam. I scammed the poor woman.
Right.
You know, so for all her faults, like,
So
let me
literally,
own
you
mine.
weren't going because you needed help. You were going because you had needed money.
That was it. I
And it was
couldn't-
a good way of like making sure that she'd cover your bills and
Yeah, that I wouldn't lose my place or my truck. And
yeah. So you went through the motions, I guess, a bit, or
no,
did you recognize, the value of what was going on at the time?
No, I was a holy terror to those poor people. And it was so bad. I AMA'd. I left treatment against medical advice and attempted to walk from Palm Springs, California, back to Baltimore, Maryland, through the desert.
Okay.
And I don't know how far I made it, but this was like August. It's like 120 degrees in the desert. I'm like, so when I say like I wasn't okay, like I was like, I'll do it somehow. Forrest Gump did it. Whatever.
Wow. Wow. And so was the only thing you were using at the time you went in, was it still spice?
I was messing around with some opiate painkillers at the time, and that's where things really took off.
Okay.
You know, I like an elderly family member had asked me to house sit somewhere in that time, and I had opened the cupboard wanting to get something to drink, and there was like this bottle of oxycodone there. So I like plugged it into the internet, and the old reliable internet was like, "Yeah, dog, take 2 of them. You'll be straight."
Okay.
And and I did that, and and I started messing around with those. So I had like this budding opiate thing, plus I'm smoking all this gas station stuff all the time.
Okay.
So,
And so then that's
Yeah.
what landed you into treatment. So you had to go through detox, I take it, or were you using that much at the time?
no, I wasn't using that much. I still did not know what dope sick was,
Okay.
or anything like that.
When did you learn what dope sick was?
Maybe a few months after I got out. The night that I came out, I immediately like IV cocaine. I've been doing that from time to time too, and just all much like a smorgasbord.
I love the
eat
way these things
Adderall.
just are like jumping in there a little bit. So now you've done like some IV cocaine.
Yeah, by this time,
Okay.
along the way, I've done Adderall and LSD and the cocaine, and I'd done heroin before, even by that time, and taken prescription painkillers. benzos.
But was anything a habit? Was this like
The
you were kind of one of
spice.
these what we call a trash can, like whatever
Yeah,
was available?
the
you would
spice
take?
was. But I always have like throughout my drug using, I always have like one thing that's like my thing, and then like whatever else on top of it is that's great.
Right. So what it was interesting about what you said is the way you found opiates, which is how so many actually find it. Like somebody forgets to like discard their opiates, they're not using them anymore, and they're just sitting out, and you just go into a cabinet and open up, and there you try it,
Boom,
and
there
there
it
you
was.
go. So
Yeah, the next thing you know, it was like, all this the time just rushed by, and I ended up homeless, in East Baltimore, living in a tent, and that, my girlfriend's turning tricks on Baltimore Street,
Okay.
and I'm like, I've got warrants out for my arrest, and that, like in the blink of an eye.
wow. So did you go to jail? Like were you in jail
Never
for?
in prison, but yeah, they kept the bed warm for me at the precinct there.
Okay. Let's talk about how you found recovery and kind of like the path of how you got there. So, like fast forward.
Sorry,
It's all good.
I'm just getting to the juicy bits.
I know, right?
So it's January in Baltimore, and it's cold, and I'm homeless, and my clothes have holes in them, and my shoes have holes in them, and I'm legitimately afraid that I'm going to freeze to death. Homeless people freeze to death up there all the time, and I'm like gripped with the fear that I'm going to freeze to death and die. So I walk to my mom's house, and I knock on her door. I'm like, Mom, it's really, really cold. Can I please stay? And she says, no, no, no. And I say, please, please, please. And she says, no, no, no. And she says, fine, but you have to go somewhere to rehab tomorrow. And I was so cold, man, I'd have done anything. So I was like, yeah, sure, rehab. And she lets me come. I sleep on the couch. She made me a meatball sub. It was the first warm meal I'd eaten probably that year.
Okay.
And it was delicious. And she wakes me up, like kicking the couch and handing me the phone. And I'm on my mom's insurance by this time, Blue Cross, and it's the Blue Cross guy, and he's like asking me like, like pre-qual questions.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 what are you using? Kind of whatever. I'm just waking up, and he asked me, where do you want to go for treatment? And I said, as far away as you can get me from Baltimore, Maryland. And he click-clacks on the computer, and he's like, I've got a place in Nashville. How does that sound? I said, that sounds great. Do you think they'll extradite to Maryland? And he's an insurance guy. He don't know.
Exactly right.
This poor guy's just trying to do his job. And
Did you have a warrant at the time?
multiple
in Maryland?
warrants, dude.
Okay.
Like it just and all like, I had one felony charge that ended up, thankfully getting dropped later. But just a rack of possession, theft, public urination. Like I just couldn't get right.
How long were you homeless for?
Probably a year and some change.
Okay. And how, like, I think people kind of like, it's always fascinating. How do you normalize being homeless? You know what I mean? Like, the idea is like, when you're hanging out, is it just kind of like an adventure type thing? Do you even notice? Like, how do you get to the point of like, this is a normal life?
It's rough, man. It's, like, I guess the culture is like, I know it, say like me and you were homeless together, like, I know that we're homeless.
Like, let's not say that. No, I'm just messing with you.
Well, yeah, like,
But go ahead, I'm
I
kidding.
know you're homeless. You know we're homeless, and like, don't complain about it because, like, there's a lot of that culture of like, don't be weak. Like, we're on the streets in East Baltimore. It's the real thing.
Right.
So like, yeah,
I mean,
everybody's
it's
heart is
freezing.
broken.
It's like, in the winter it's freezing, in the summer it's hot. Like I just can't even fathom like I don't know the thought process of like how you get to like, was it opiates? Was it kind of like a, like didn't want to be sick all the time, didn't care about anything other than drugs? Like, what is the thought process, like of how did it begin? Like, how did you end up homeless?
Just ran out of places to go, man. It was, my mom put me out, and then me and my cousin were staying. Me and my cousin were staying at that basement we were renting. They found needles there eventually, kicked us out, went and stayed with another friend, and, the drama ended up happening. She kicked us out and, stayed in an abandoned house for a while, then stayed in my car for a while. They got kicked out of the abandoned house, car got repoed, and it was, just found myself like it was 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and had nowhere to go, and just walked back into like where I knew a homeless community was.
Okay.
Just found an empty tent, started sleeping in it. An orange cat came and stayed the night with me my first night ever.
Wow.
It made me feel a lot better.
That is interesting. Just the concept of how far you've come, from that space of being homeless. We know that you're not homeless now and that you are way in one of the nicest suburbs in Nashville at the time. And so, that's really what recovery can do. And so when you made it to that treatment center, this was the last treatment center you went to, what got you sober or what kept you sober? What was it that made you realize, or was this not the last one? Was this a between?
This was that was the first time I went and got like a message of recovery, and I was clean for a year and a half.
Okay.
Ended up relapsing for like 6 months and went back to the same treatment center.
Okay, which was?
It was Stillwaters.
Stillwaters, okay. Which is a 12-step immersion program here in Tennessee. So you focused on the 12 steps is how you got sober?
Yes. 12 steps with the big caveat that like I think a big piece of the 12 steps is like actual true peer work. And at Stillwaters, I just met people who were further along in recovery than I was, who like, I'd been living indoors for all of not 30 days by the time I get there. And I'm coming from like this mentality that I was just telling you about, that like, it's just a straight up like it's a dog eat dog like street mentality,
right.
Like everything and everyone is dangerous.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't connect to like clinical therapy.
Right.
I remember sitting across from a counselor at some point, and like, I've been like jumped for like $4 worth of heroin a few weeks before that, and like some lady in like business casual attire is trying to DBT me, and I'm like, lady, like you're so far away from me right now.
Yeah.
Like I know that they taught you this somewhere, and I know that there are people out there who this will work for, but like I'm just not one of them. I really, really wish that I was, because I wanted somebody to reach me. But like this just wasn't it. So I got to Stillwaters, and I met people who like they carried themselves like men in recovery, but they still had some of that like
grit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like their teeth were still a little bit sharp.
Right. No, that's understandable. So, trauma. There's a lot of stuff about, when you're homeless and you're on the street, there's a lot of traumas that you're picking up. Like that's just not the most normal space to live. You talked about the fact that, how rough it was and how difficult it was, and there was no complaining. You've gotten mugged. How many times did that happen?
Good twice.
Good twice?
Good twice.
What was the most traumatic thing that happened while you were homeless? Would you say?
Traumatic is a funny word. I guess what I would say was scary. I was walking up a dark road, and I didn't have a phone or anything, no like watch or nothing, because I'm homeless, and I had just gotten some heroin, and I wanted to go to a bar to shoot the heroin. I got to make it to the bar by 2 because that's when they close. So I see some guys standing by a gas station. I'm like, hey, yo, what time is it? And they're like real aggressive, like, we don't know. And like, they got their phones in their hands. I'm like, all right, like, okay. And they yelled back like, hey, you got a cigarette? And I was smoking a cigarette. I had cigarettes, and I was like, no, I don't have a cigarette. You guys want to tell me what time it is? And I get like down this dark portion of the road, and I just hear footsteps coming up behind me, and I turn around. I'm just getting hit over and over and over again. One guy, and I start like trying to fight back, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys.
What?
Yeah, man. Just
beating
me. I try to run, and I fall, and I'm like getting kicked, and I'm like, these dudes are gonna kill me. So they're like, give us what you got, blah blah blah. And like at first I pull out my phone because it's a dead, like cracked old, like it doesn't work. It's just like a brick that I have in my pocket of nothingness. So I give that to them. And then they're like, what else you got? You got cigarettes? And I'm like, man, my dope's in my cigarette packs. And I'm like, man, yeah, here. And they're like beating me, and I give them the cigarettes. And then, and then they ran away, and I got up and tried to get away. And, they didn't get to my wallet, which still had like $10 in it, which was cool.
And did you immediately go buy more drugs, or like?
No, it was too late. It was too late. All the D-boys were up for the night. But the next day.
Right. Isn't that how it works? It's like, I still have money, let me go get something.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So, isn't being homeless itself traumatizing? Or would you say that? Like, I see there's like a disconnect still between, like I think there's a lot of normalization when we're in, outside in active addiction of things that we think of as just this is our lives. So this is just where we are. This is how we go through it. But in reality, when you're looking at it now, could you imagine like your children going through what you're dealing with right now? I know you have children, and so the idea, could you see that? Could you imagine how hard that would be? If you looked at it from someone else's perspective or someone else going through that.
I believe that people experience trauma differently, and the way that, for me, being homeless wasn't traumatizing. To me, it's something about the contrast that's traumatizing.
Okay.
So when I was homeless, we were kind of a lower income family anyway, and it wasn't that much different. But now, living in the suburbs and driving a halfway decent car, and I was at an event downtown just last week, and I was walking by homeless people, and I physically had like heart palpitations, thinking about like just the disparity.
Right.
So that the trauma for me comes in like looking over that void, everything that's in between that place and the place that I'm at now.
Okay.
That's the kind of stuff that makes my guts turn.
So have you done anything around that? Any therapy yet?
No.
Other than
No.
I love the fact sometimes of we are so stubborn as to like looking at. I've just now started, so 12 years sober in January. Like the idea is I don't need therapy. The trauma that I've gone through or what is was normalized. So I've just now started taking time to look at the level of denial. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's denial. That things that I've experienced or the ways of my seeing the world or my putting myself together after trauma. What would you say is trauma for you? Like if you know what I mean? Like since you don't see that, which to me is traumatizing just to think about.
Yeah.
But in your space, what do you think of as trauma? When you look at your life and you go, hey, what traumatic experiences have you been through?
Professional social events are traumatizing.
Okay.
For me. I would much rather be beaten and robbed or shot at. And maybe not in the most literal sense of the word, but
Okay. And is this because you're an introvert? And this
I would consider
bothers
myself
you?
an introvert. No, I
Okay.
would definitely even consider myself an extrovert, just because it's scary. It's scary in ways that I can't fully describe, but in the sense of on the street, I understand the threat. Like, things are very obvious.
Okay.
And like you've seen it for long enough, and like you kind of know what these goons are up to. And not just limited to professional, but like people who aren't like that are just a whole new class of goon. And I don't, I don't fully understand. Dude, I don't fully understand society. I just don't.
Okay.
So I guess the trauma fits in for me of like, maybe like this underlying belief that I'm in some way out of place.
Okay. Is it a
And-
self-esteem issue? You think like you don't belong here? You don't, people
Not
are
in the
gonna
sense
see
of like
through
I'm
it?
below these people self-esteem, but in the sense of I'm different. Like like an alien. It's how I feel, man. Like I'm on an
Yeah.
alien planet. Like I'm from like planet Earth, where like we sleep in tents and some of us freeze to death sometimes, and a bunch of people overdosed, and they shoot at us, and now I'm like on this alien planet where like like we wear jackets, and we make sure our clothes are clean, and we make sure that there's food in the refrigerator, and we go to work and we love each other, and it's just the shock of it. Even though it's happened over a course of years, it's just been shocking.
Right.
If I'm being honest, it has.
So that's I find that to be kind of just interesting, like coming from such dysfunction, and that's generally what being a substance use disorder is about, is dysfunctional living. And then when things get better, you know what I mean? Like when you actually get into a space where everything is, you're always looking at how it's going to fall apart. Or you always have this, well, this is great right now, but soon it's all going to just like come crumbling down, and you're always watching for the threat.
Keep a backpack,
You know what I mean?
man.
Like
Always.
wondering what's going on. So it's interesting that you bring that up, because that is kind of like it's a sign of trauma. You know what I mean? A sign of trauma is always assuming there's going to be something around the corner, that's going to destroy it all. You know what I mean? And there comes this not being able to trust that everything is going to be okay. And it's just coming down to identifying that. So it'll be interesting once you do, I'll be interested in hearing a little bit more about, like I said, 12 years, it took me a very, very long time to even be able to admit to myself that that I had trauma. And even then, that most of my life was being in denial. But I still have that same concept that it's all going to fall apart. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of when it's going to fall apart. So
yeah, anyway. I'm totally open to it. It's just a matter of time, and that I guess it's not something that's interrupting my daily life. So if, it's something that I rarely think about at this point, if I'm being honest. There's definitely still some rocks to unturn there. Right.
Well, that's good. I mean, you've actually come through it. You've been in recovery, and that you're moving into a better space. So that's amazing. So we really have kind of run over time a little bit. It's all right, because I got so lost and fascinated in everything that you were saying. Some of the takeaways that I think are just really brilliant about your story is that, how far down you went and how far up you've come. Like, one of the things that I can actually say about Rich is that he does help people. He's actually there on the front lines, really kind of lending his heart and soul to getting people into treatment and making sure, that message. You have a company now called Rosecrest Recovery Services, where you do like interventions and you kind of help people. I know that you worked with Buffalo Valley there briefly. Are you a peer recovery specialist? So you do a lot of peer recovery. So, the one thing that you should know about, recovery is that recovery is real, and recovery is something that everybody, no matter how far down you get, that there's a way of getting back up and giving back to the community. And so I really commend you for that. So this has been Rich Johnston with us today, who has shared a lot of his story, kind of gone really deep to talk about, what it's like to actually struggle and then recover. And this has been Recovery Matters. And again, I'm Orlando Andrews, and I hope you join us next week. Thank you for joining us.
We are currently undergoing a mental health crisis. Millions of people are struggling with depression, anxiety, PTSD, suicidal ideations, or a substance use disorder. If you or someone you know needs help with a behavioral health, mental health, or addiction issue, please reach out. There is support for what you're going through. Call 800-676-0929 to speak with a recovery navigator who will help you find support. Again, call 800-676-0929. Call now. Recovery is possible, and recovery matters.